Okay, so real quick here before I start the regular video, if you're just here to see how to wire in a fuel gauge from scratch, here's a quick wiring diagram. As you can see, here is the 12-volt battery. What you do is you run one wire. I installed a external voltage regulator. If your vehicle already has one, you can just go tap off of it. My voltage regulator needs to be connected to ground. Take the 5-volt lead from that, go to one terminal on your fuel gauge. The other terminal on the fuel gauge, for the first gen Dodge with the Cummins, goes to the 4th from the left terminal for the fuel gauge. For the low fuel light, I'm using a 12-volt low fuel light. You send that over to the 5th from the left plug, and the ground goes to the 2nd from the left prong on the plug. And this here is from, if that is the left for me, so that's the 2nd, 4th, and 5th. Thank you, and stay tuned for the rest of the video if you're staying around. Hello everybody. Today, in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to completely rewire a fuel level sensor and gauge in my 1990 Dodge W250. So as you can see, I currently have the sending unit out and on the desk here. I also have a multimeter hooked up, currently set to ohms for resistance. Right now I have the two leads hooked up. One is hooked to the ground for the fuel gauge, and the other one is hooked to the signal wire for the fuel gauge. So the way these fuel gauges or fuel sensors work in particular is based off resistance. I think most vehicles are the same. For this model, as the tank is full, you are at the lowest resistance, about 16 to 20 ohms. But as the tank level drops, the resistance increases to somewhere around 120 ohms. So that's just for the sensor in the tank, and that's just for the reading. However, this sensor also has a low fuel indicator light, which illuminates when it is, I believe, at 1/6 of a tank. As you can see, currently it is a closed circuit, as it's very low resistance. But as the fuel level increases, at this point here, it's an open loop. So the light would be off until it is down to very near the bottom of the tank. The plug on this I was attached to, it has both these two left ports are for ground. For the use of the fuel gauge, it only needs the second to the left connector. This far left ground is for a fuel pump. However, this model of sending unit here with the Cummins diesel engine does not have a in-tank fuel pump. The fuel pump is rather mounted to the side of the engine. Same goes for this middle connector. There's no wire in it, as it would be the power lead to the fuel pump. This blue and yellow wire here is the signal wire for the fuel gauge. And this last green wire is for the low fuel indicator light. Okay, so a lot has happened since I filmed the last video clip. As you can see here, I have the fuel sensor off of the sending unit, and I have disassembled it. What was happening is I had it all hooked up to the fuel gauge, as it should be, and I was getting peculiar readings that were not accurate. So I tried holding this float up to the full position, and the most I could get the gauge to read was 3/8 of a tank. And I know that the sensor here is good, as in the last clip I tested it with the multimeter, and the ohm readings that I got were accurate and where they should be. So I discovered while trying to get it to work that if I pressed in on this rod here, which goes in here, if I pressed down and put pressure on it, the gauge would read as it should. So I have now disassembled the sensor. The way it goes together, you have this metal pin that slides through from the bottom up through this hole. Then this arm wedges in underneath of the lip there. I will show that in a minute. This arm here presses on top of there, and the float wraps around here and clips into there. So what I discovered is, I don't know if you can see it that well, but on that tab there's a section that has been worn in an arc shape. This is from years of bobbing around in the tank, I would assume. So I will now assemble this. You see I have the pin through the bottom. This slides under there like that. And the pin pushes up. I have just loosely put the pin in. If you want to do it properly, you can push the pin all the way till it bottoms out. But it's not needed for this demonstration. As you can see, it slides under that plastic retaining lip there. And you can see how it's worn. So what has happened is, because it's worn like that, it can move and display. So that is what was causing the fuel reading to be inaccurate, I believe. Another culprit for this inaccuracy is this I don't know what this is. I think it might be a brass plate is worn from the contact on the bottom of this arm here rubbing on it. So I'm going to both flip this upside down, and I bought this JB Weld fuel resistant epoxy putty. So I'm going to try and build that lip back up to where it should be and sand it flat to hopefully eliminate the play in the arm here. Okay, so another update. I know in the last clip I said I was going to try some epoxy to try and fix the wear on this arm. But I tried that and it didn't seem to want to adhere to such a small surface. So instead what I did, I cut up a pop tin and punched a hole through it. And I've already tested it. If I put the pop tin shim underneath of this contact here and put it underneath onto there, everything works. And it's nice and tight. I tried a washer and my thinnest washer was still too thick, but it appears that this is the perfect thickness. Okay, so I have everything installed the way it should be. So as you can see, I have my ground wire connected there. Both of these wires go into the cab under the dash. I'll show you where they go. So as I've mentioned before, this here green wire, which turns to yellow, is for the low fuel indicator light, and this blue and yellow wire, which turns to blue, is for the fuel gauge. And this here is a ground wire. I've just used a self-tapping screw put into the frame. So I tested it off camera and everything works. Although I should have taken a video, but I did not. The fuel gauge does move when you raise and lower the float for the tank. I've not tested it with fuel, but it works outside of the tank. So as you can see here, I installed an external voltage regulator because this truck did not have one on it, and the fuel gauge requires 5 volts in order to work. So the way I have it, somewhat temporarily, I have the positive wire stealing some electricity from this fuse here. I believe that's for the radio, but it could be for it could have been rewired for something else. I don't know, but it works. So this wire here is for the 5 volts, and it goes up, connects to this green wire here, and it connects to one of the 2 leads on the back of the fuel gauge. So I should have taken a picture of this, but there's 2 metal threaded rods that stick out the back of the fuel gauge. What you do is I put one of them has 5 volts and the other one runs to the fuel tank, as my wiring diagram shows. You can see there's my external voltage regulator. It goes to the fuel gauge to the one prong, out the other to there. And I have this box here is grounded out just to this screw over here. Pretty simple wiring for this overall. If you have any more questions about it, or actually before I end the video, I should add this here is my temporary low fuel light. It's just a trailer indicator light hooked up on 12 volts. I'm eventually going to get a proper low fuel indicator light, and I'm probably going to make a proper panel like the truck should have had. All the Cummins trucks came with a information panel here with 5 or 6 lights in it, and that's where the factory low fuel light would have been. But this thing has this, it's not that useful. It's this holder in the dash, but you can't fit anything in it. It gets too small for a phone, and you can't really fit anything else in it. So I'm just gonna put a plate across there and put an actual light on eventually. But this light works. As you can see, it illuminates because there's no fuel in the tank. So overall, a pretty simple installation. If you have any questions about how it's wired in, or the terminals used, or anything, really any question to do with this, please leave a comment. Thanks for watching.